Andrew, it's great to see you.
My pleasure to be here.
Where are you sitting right now? Where are you located at? What city?
I live in Austin, well, just north of Austin, Texas, in Round Rock.
Okay. Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I know the area real well.
Yeah.
There's actually a
right by the
room
Dell,
not far from you.
Dell campus. Yeah. So.
Excellent. So I'm out of our Southern California office, Santa Fe Springs. So we kind of cover everything from basically San Francisco all the way down to San Diego and this coast. And of course, as you know, we've got our office in Pennsylvania, just outside of Exton, Pennsylvania, that covers more of a New York, D.C., Virginia area, and coverage basically all over the country to kind of make sure that we're meeting our customers' needs. So I guess let's jump into a few things. Let's talk a little bit about. Actually, I'd love to maybe understand a little bit more about you, where you come from, because I think you've got a pretty good history.
Yeah. So, well, if we're going to dive into me a little bit, maybe let's. I spent many years in the AV industry. I came from Utah, so I grew up in Utah. That's where I kind of got my start. Did everything from networking to music venues. I worked for a local VAR there, and then I started working for Polycom for many years. I worked for Polycom, classic Polycom, not the current version. And spent many years over there, and I came to Logitech about 3 years ago. So I've spent most of my life in the channel side of things, which means I don't really work with customers anymore directly. I work with partners like you, and that's where I spend all my time. And then if I engage a customer, it's through you. So I will engage customers, but I'm usually working as a consult to you and to other companies very similar to you. So I spend all my time doing that. And so I love that, because what it means is that there's experts in the field like you that you guys have to know everything. And then I get to drill down on my particular products and be the guy in the cape, I guess, to come in and save the day, to help with the specific Logitech questions and issues, especially when it comes to designing the proper solutions and really helping your customers out. And so while it may sound like I don't engage customers, that's absolutely not true, because I support you guys in your engagement to customers, and that's what I love.
Absolutely. That's great. That's awesome. So I guess you have a very unique perspective when it comes to trying to attack some of these rooms and these room designs. So what does that look like typically from your perspective? Because I know I go about it a certain way, but we're a little bit more biased, and I'd love to hear your approach to it.
So I have a 4-step approach to room design, and this kind of scales through all the different types of rooms and even the different platforms. And so when I'm looking at a room system, and when I'm consulting with a design engineer about like why we might choose one product or another in a particular room, and even because I'm in the channel, I know that you're likely, the designers I work with, we're likely going to have integrated rooms. It's not just going to always be Logitech, even though, of course, I always want the most Logitech possible. But the more important thing are the 4 main principles I always look at in room design. And the top 2 are similar, but not exactly the same. And they're the consistency. The experience needs to be a very consistent experience across the entire ecosystem. And number 2, it needs to be easy to use, but not easy to use just for the end user. Easy to use, easy to manage, and easy to deploy. And then, and only once we get those 2 things set, do I talk about high quality audio and high quality video. And my thinking behind all this is, if we take it in reverse, we often demo in reverse. No matter how good your video is, no matter how wonderful and beautiful a video is, if you can't hear me, we're not having a meeting.
Absolutely.
Before that, if I can't start the meeting, we're not having a meeting. And if the meeting is not able to be managed and maintained on a day-to-day basis, we're not having the meeting. And so that's why I use those 4 principles. So starting with consistency, I have engineers that will argue ease of use over consistency, and I disagree with them on that. My personal preference is, if once I've learned how to use a room system, I don't care if it's a huddle room, a large conference room, or what it is, if I can take that knowledge and transpose that knowledge into all the different room systems I go, no matter what size it is, that's a consistent experience. Then, of course, we want that experience, that ability to learn that system. We need it to be easy to use. We need to have a simple, easy to use for an end user scenario. But that's why my thinking is. So again, if you can't start the call, you can't have the call. If you don't know how to start the call, you can't have the call. And then if you can't hear the person on the call, no matter how good the video is, you can't have the call. So those are my priorities.
And I'm going to toot your horn a little further on this one because I deal a lot with Logitech solutions myself and are regularly putting them in. And reliability is another factor. And it's something you probably don't talk about often because it's sort of an expectation. It's probably something from your perspective, it's like expected. It's got to be reliable. It's got to work. But you'd be surprised at how many solutions out there don't work every time, and so that is definitely a big part of it. I think this segues us a little bit into it because it's something I wanted to talk about. But as well, when you talk about the ability to sort of manage this and having some consistency across the board, it's one of those areas that's really important to our customers that they maybe didn't even know. I oftentimes use the statement of saying like, as a customer, like you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know what you're missing until you've kind of seen what's better on the other side. And I think a lot of IT companies or a lot of IT teams within an operation, when we get in there, they're used to the idea that we've got an executive that wants to run a call, so we've got to have an IT guy go to the room to set it up and get it ready to go. We don't have that with Logitech. And in addition, they can manage and monitor everything, collectively, globally, on not just their site, but also across the entire operation. So let's talk a little bit, I guess, about that and understanding a little bit more about the ecosystem that makes that valuable.
Yeah, that's that talk. When I talk about it, consistency and easy use, but not just for the end user, for the people deploying it and the people managing it. That's what if the device is not on and working, you're not having that meeting, and that's that ecosystem. So for instance, we have our sync platform. Our sync platform is the center of all that. Every one of our devices runs what's called CollabOS. CollabOS is the firmware that runs on the hardware that gives you all the cool features and functions within the room. But that is, while that's important, our cloud management platform is even more important. And that's the piece that communicates with the onboard firmware that allows us to remotely manage and monitor the device. And we do not charge for sync. Well, I want to clarify that just a bit, because you can go get a free sync account, but if you don't own a Logitech device, you're not using it for anything.
Sure.
So what I like to say is it's included in the cost of all of our devices. And that gives all of our customers that peace of mind to be able to go, okay, I don't have to physically step in the room to know if that device is connected, to know if the firmware is updated, to even schedule that firmware or update. A lot of customers, through either security or the ability to want to make sure everything is running well, they like to have a scheduled reboot every night when everyone's asleep and at home, and that way they can know. First of all, if it doesn't come back on, they wake up the next morning, they're fixing that device before they come up. Or if if there's an issue, or sometimes something happens throughout the day, just the reboot. I always tell my wife, if I'm ever on life support, just unplug it and plug it back in and see if that works. But sometimes the reboot just solves your just knowing that you start fresh reboot every day. So a lot of customers want to have that reboot. They don't have to physically do that. They can schedule that within our sync platform. That's a huge time saver. There's a story back in my early days of being an engineer. I used to manage and maintain a whole company's systems, and my job was to update the firmware. So whenever the firmware came around, and these were old Polycom systems, back in the day, the old HDX and early group systems, every time I had to update one of those, because that particular company didn't have any kind of infrastructure to manage it, I had to physically, walk in with a USB drive, walk into each one of those rooms, and plug it in. An hour later, walk into the next room, and at the end of that week, I finally would get those updates up. And then if a new security patch came on, I started that whole process again. So often I was doing my regular other work that I was doing in every one of those conference rooms simply so I could step in the room and do. That's what we don't want to do that. So that's where Logitech, and we give, we could have, if we wanted to, the company I was working for, we could have bought the infrastructure to not have to deal with that, but that was a lot of money. With Logitech, it's included in the cost of the device. You do not have to even worry about that. That's all built into our device.
Yeah, and it's actually something that I oftentimes say to our customers is, technology does fail. Like, we're not going to pretend like it doesn't. It does fail at times. There is a lot of parts and pieces that are connecting together here. Oftentimes we've got Teams that are linking in or Zoom that's linking in, and we have their software to deal with as well. And sometimes with the stars aligning incorrectly, things just don't work perfect, and a reboot does fix that issue. And so it is necessary to be prepared to do that and to admit that, hey, that's just part of the how we've considered this setup to make sure that you have the ability to remotely support it. So really valuable.
The nice thing is we've added a new feature very recently, starting in April, and that's the ability to remote into all our devices. Now let me set the context a little bit. In Microsoft Teams and Zoom rooms, there's always been a divide when it comes to the types of rooms you can deploy. There's Android-based room systems, and there's Windows-based room systems. In the Windows-based room systems, one nice feature is, because Windows had a remote desktop capability, I could remote into any Windows system without stepping foot in that and actually manipulate it as if I was standing in that room. It's a remote desktop. It's what your IT guy does when you call up laptop and they all of a sudden take over your computer to start messing with you. And that's been part of Windows forever. And there's a lot of from the remote desktop that comes included on it to Go to Resolve, TeamViewer. You can name however many different applications. So in the Windows-based world, that's always been there. And but in the Android-based world, we've never had the ability to remote into it.
That's true.
2 years ago or 3 years ago, that meant that 70% of the market could remote into it, but only 30% were Android. And so that was a gap, and that was a significant gap, but not. But truthfully, it wasn't as big of a gap. Well, from what I'm told, now someone can totally check me on these numbers, but I read in March that for the first time in Microsoft Teams rooms, Android deployments overtook Windows deployments. Okay. So now that gap is significantly bigger. And think about the money you save when you don't have to always step in the room to fix the situations that come up. Logitech in April brought it with our 1.12 Collab OS release, the ability to remote UI into Android devices. And we do it below the platform. So we're not utilizing Teams or Zoom or any of the other platforms to do this. We're doing it at our firmware level. Now, we do require some services, so it's not the free like we talked about with our other sync application. There is some services you would need to pay for. And you do need to do some setup with it. But once you do all that, it means a technician can literally remote into the device, fix what's going on, and configure it without stepping in there. It's a huge update, and it's really taken Android deployments into that enterprise grade level and really going to accelerate that. Because that's one thing in some customers that held them back from Android. It's like, this is great, but when I lose the ability to remote into, that costs me so much more in personnel time to have to physically drive over and do it. Now, it's not going to always be the case that you never have to step in the room. But if we can reduce the truck rolls down to a significantly few, we save everyone time and money. And that's one of the things Logitech's always thinking about.
Well, and again, don't hold me to the number, but I think that we've kind of determined that 95% at least of the issues that come up is something that we can handle remotely because of things like the sync portal. And so we avoid having to dispatch a truck. That's a huge savings to the customer. It also minimizes our managed services agreements with them, so they don't have to spend as much money on it. So it's a huge plus for everybody across the board. And while that's big cost, and absolutely, the cost for a customer and many customers for a device that goes down because of the loss of productivity is sometimes hard to quantify. Sometimes some customers can quantify it because of the way they work. Maybe they're a law firm and their billable hours are really down to the minute. You know what I mean? But a lot of people don't quantify it. But if you truly think about the cost
for the technician to go on site, the downtime of the device. Think about it being the CEO's personal room. That can destroy days of productivity if that goes down, and now he has to go use something else. So we're just trying to keep that down to a minimum.
Yeah, and obviously the companies that we work with that have IT teams in-house, they have access to that. When they don't, we handle that for them, and that's where our managed services agreement comes into play. We always tell everybody, when that meeting goes down, it's extremely painful when you have to go to everybody and say, oh, we got to have a technician come out tomorrow to fix it, or in 2 days. And if we can handle that instantly, that's a great thing for everybody. So that's definitely a big plus.
And I love that you tooted our horn earlier, because I think it is good to bring back up here. We are known to be a very stable product.
Mm-hmm.
But
absolutely.
But I would be remiss if I didn't. We're not 100%. No technology is. There will be times when things go down, and we are just trying to make this easy for you when it does.
Yep, absolutely. That's a great point. I think one of the things we didn't touch on as you were talking there was this idea of intimacy within a call, and that's something I think that people forget to talk about. But when we do these calls, like the auto tracking features that Logitech has kind of put in place really change everything. You talked about a lot of the steps before about it needs to make sure that it's easy to use and that it's reliable and all these different factors, but it also yes, the customer needs to see us and hear us, but what better for them to see us up close, right? It's a much different experience when we're looking at a boardroom and it's a 16-person room and everybody is far away than it would be if the camera is zooming in and you get a much better view. Whether that be auto tracking or whether that be using something like the Logitech Sight camera, which is pretty amazing itself. So maybe we can dive a little bit into that, because I think there's some really cool features that I've heard that Logitech is adding with smart switching, which could really add even more value to that.
I love this topic, and truthfully, I give my priorities, and this is the one concept that seems to span all of them. It's nice to say I have high quality audio, high quality video, and that I need to make sure I have those things. However, when I'm in the call, if I have to manipulate the remote control, I lose my ease of use. I lose my consistent experience. So it all falls down. So framing technologies is kind of bracketed around all four of my priorities, and so it's one of the key things I always talk about. Here's an interesting story, and again, from my years past, before things like group framing, and this is why framing technologies and these kind of technologies are very important. Years ago, same company that I was at before, I kept getting called because the big conference room, the biggest conference room that we had, seated 30 people, was having some audio issues. And I didn't know what the audio issues, and I couldn't recreate them. And so I kept going up, tried to recreate the audio issues, didn't happen. So I sneaked into the back of a session one day. A bunch of people were having a meeting, and I just sneaked in, see if I could hear what was going on. Well, I didn't hear. It took me weeks more to troubleshoot the audio issues, and this really isn't a story about the audio issues. The story is, when I walked into that room, the people in that room had huddled themselves to one corner of the room, and I thought, why are they doing that? And I knew one of the people in the room, so after the meeting was over, I'm like, were you guys doing some sort of exercise, or what was that about? And he said, no, that's where the camera was pointed. And apparently, no one, whoever had been using it before this meeting, had zoomed it to that point, and no one knew how to move it or wanted to try, and it was too intimidating for them. So they just moved their chairs into wherever the camera was pointed. And I use that story to highlight that ease of use. It needs to be simple and easy to use, and that applies to how the camera moves and tracks us. And so that's why this is important. And so framing technologies start simple with group framing. Group framing is very simple. It just sees the people in and it frames them in. This is your standard framing technology, and likely going to be the place you start with framing technologies in your rooms. However, based on what you do in that room and how it's set up, you may want a myriad of different framing technologies, and you talked about a few of them. So in some rooms, speaker tracking, finding individual speakers, zooming in on that speaker when they're talking, and then moving to the next one. That's the right solution for it. That's been around for a long time. Very important. We definitely do that. That's an industry standard. But a few years ago, some new framing technologies started coming into play. And one of the key ones was what we at Logitech call grid view. Now other companies call it something else, but we call it grid view. And what this technology does is sees the people in the room, and because we got very used to having an equitable experience, especially when we were all home for 2 years for some unknown natural cause that happened over COVID-19, a lot of people got very used to seeing everyone in an equitable experience. And so then when they move back to the office, all of a sudden this conference experience wasn't the same. And so grid view came out of that. Well, grid view is great when everyone is facing the camera. It works really wonderful because the laws of physics say I can see each individual person clearly, I can frame them in clearly. But once people start sitting in different places, like in a classic bowling alley room, what I call a bowling alley room, that long conference room style, all of a sudden grid view starts falling apart because hitchhikers. What I call hitchhikers, I frame in on you, but the person right next to you's elbow and arm is in your shot, and then your half of your head is in his shot or her shot. And we have a lot of issues because we don't have the correct angle to see everyone to do the grid view experience, but we still want to do that meeting equity type of experience. So what Logitech did is said, you know what, we're going to take a form factor from something we didn't really love and we never designed a product around, but it had a form factor that was interesting to us, and that was the 360 degree camera. We did not build a 360 degree camera, by the way, but the form factor made sense to us because it's basically taking a camera and putting it in the center of the table. The problem with the 360 degree cameras were the way they had to work meant the context of the room fell apart. It was hard to tell where someone was sitting, and there was a lot of fatigue in the video because the stretched video and the way we had to stretch everyone across the screen. And so we never really liked to do that. And because AI is now very much part of what we did, we took the form factor of a 360 degree camera and added it to a front of the room camera. And now essentially what we've given is the rally bar doesn't just have a front of the room camera, it now has 2 additional cameras in the center of the table, and then we let the AI determine the best shot. Initially, what we did as we worked on this, we deployed it where and that's what we call the sight camera. The sight camera sits in the center of it. It connects to the rally bar, and the original deployment of the sight camera was the sight would give you these grid view experience in there, but then we'd still give you kind of a picture-in-picture from the front of the room of the rally bar, which was in a group view. So we got to still see everyone. The problem with that is it wasn't taking advantage of every camera in the room to the right way. So about 2 months ago, we started releasing a beta, and you mentioned it. It's called Smart Switching. And now we've trained the AI to do something magical. So based on wherever anyone is looking, whichever camera, whether that's the cameras on the site or the camera on the rally bar, whichever has the best view of you based on where you're looking and where you're talking and who you're talking to, that's the camera that's going to frame you into your grid view screen. And I might have a different view. There might be multiple conversations going on, or I might have a different point of view of what I'm looking at. And so I might be looking somewhere different than you. And so I might be coming from the rally bar, and you might be coming from the site, sitting in the same room with the same experience. And that right there is taking that to the next level. The beauty of doing that is because now we've taken AI and trained it which camera we can use. We can now add additional sites to it in the future. This is not something we're doing now. But
excited about that, by the way.
The next step is what we're going to allow us to daisy chain the rally bar, a sight camera, and a third sight camera, and allow the AI to determine which of the. It's now we're up to 6 different cameras that we can actually use. So it's a very, very exciting time in this, and we're just growing more and more in what we're doing.
And for anyone who doesn't know, the site actually has a microphone on top of it as well. So it's really nice because in applications where we have customers who say, hey, I want to add that site after the fact, I can take the microphone location that we have on their table and replace it, and it's perfect. So it really works out well.
It's a great addition that way. So
yeah, and just touching on what you said earlier, you mentioned earlier, obviously as an integrator, somebody who does large rooms and small rooms, a combination of everything, there was definitely a point where we would say, like I would say, on all honesty, that Logitech fits the mark for probably 85% of the rooms out there that we were doing. But we had these rooms that were on the upper echelon that needed more details, had a lot more views. It was a much larger room. And to be frank, I think smart switching is going to resolve some of that issues as well, where we actually will fit the mark with Logitech for those as well. So that's a really, really exciting thing.
Can I bring up one other point, though? Because
Sure.
We've all talked about the customer experience and the end user experience, and we've talked a little bit about the IT management experience. But site brings up a category of anyone who's actually installing this. This is likely to your field techs, Brad, but also your customers who have to get involved sometimes in the field to make sure all this stuff is being managed. And the way we are deploying our products now is in a less proprietary way than we used to deploy. And what I mean by that is us and a lot of other companies and my competitors and others have gotten into the habit of creating proprietary cabling systems. Proprietary cabling systems are nice because they allow us to deliver proprietary technology, but they're also very hard to work with. Think about pulling a proprietary cable through conduit and breaking that cable, and now you have to buy a new proprietary cable to do that. So with site and other situations, over the last 2 years, Logitech has been moving away from proprietary cabling systems. Yet we're not cutting off our own foot because we're still delivering proprietary technology. We're just changing the way we do it. So we're taking our proprietary technology and allowing a conversion over into classic proprietary category cables. So with the site camera, for instance, you can deliver a site camera and run category 6A cabling to do it. You're still getting a dongle on our end that is proprietary dongle. It converts it to Cat 6A and then allows you guys to run that through conduit. And then it comes up and then connects to the site. And so that's a huge update, a huge upgrade. Think about you're building out a building and you're trying to figure out what cabling has to be pre-run. Well, classically, Logitech, you would have also had to put in a proprietary extension cable for our mics, possibly a USB strong cable for some applications. And now we're moving into applications with the site and with our we have a extension cable for our cameras called the Rally Mic Pod Coupler. This is what Logitech is doing to make everything easier to, remember I said easy to use, easy to manage, and easy to deploy. This is what we're doing. And we have some new things that I can't talk about today, but maybe we can get back on a different call in a few months that we're going to fall into this category. That is exciting. Maybe for not the end user who walks in and touches the room, but for those of us who work in the rooms and actually manage and deploy these rooms, there's some exciting stuff coming from Logitech. So.
Yeah, actually, I include at this point the Cat 6 conversion for the mic pods right off the bat on every single project at this point because it's significant.
Truthfully, my goal is to turn those old extension cables into dust collectors at distribution and force distribution and Logitech to get together to figure out what to do with those devices that no one's buying anymore. So the more I talk about it, the better.
That was the hardest conversation to have with customers, to be honest, in the past, because we would have that conversation of saying, Logitech is great, but just know that we've got some proprietary cables we've got to put in place for it. And they're not cheap
and
because
it makes
they've got
sense.
long distances.
Yeah, it makes sense if you think about it. Logitech just works. So we were very strong in saying we want to use proprietary technology, and that way we can control it.
Yeah.
Well, we realized we can still do that. We can have our cake and eat it too. We can convert it to a category cable and convert it back, and that way we can still control the proprietary side of things, but allow you guys to deliver it with classic category cables.
I think there was a lot of people that thought for a long time that this was just Logitech pulling an Apple move, where they were saying, you got to buy our cables, it's going to cost a lot more money. And the truth of it is, from my perspective, it wasn't that way. It was the fact that we didn't want to have to rely on the customer's network if there was a problem there. And by having proprietary cabling, we can control that experience all the way through from front to back.
That's exactly right. That was that was our intention.
it made a lot of sense for us once we actually, started implementing it. So I guess diving in, I'm going to actually jump off the rails a little bit since we were talking a little bit about Sync Portal and things of that sort. But something I've come across recently is customers asking a lot more for hot desking and flex desk. And what do you have to say about that?
This is a great topic.
Yeah,
so I think I'll lead into it by going, hey, coming out of COVID, hot desking's always been around. Like there's always a need to have some sort of situation. But post-COVID, we realized we don't have to work at an office all the time. Yet, and some people believed originally you'd never have to come to the room. They were wrong. But people who believed you were going to come back 100% to the office, they were also wrong. And what we found is it's likely, now in some cases, depending on your job role, they were wrong. There are some roles that you have to be in all the time and some roles you have to be at home all the time. But for most of us, what we found was that work changed after COVID to this degree that work is really not where we go. It's what we do. And because of that, we needed to create new ways of thinking about it. And so, but if I'm working from home 2 days a week and I come into the office 3 days a week, or if I'm at home 2 days a week and come into the office 3 days a week and come into the office 2 days a week, facilities started to go, I can't conceivably give Brad his own office desk all the time, unless you're the CEO of the company and you get your own, but for the average worker, I may not ever step into the office 7 days a week ever again in my life, but I likely will be going in 2 days a week or 3 days a week or for certain situations. And when I go, I need to have a place to work consistently if I don't want to be stuck. And I've had that. So everyone's experienced that, where they go to the office and there's no available desks. And so what do? You sit in the lunchroom typing on it while everyone comes in and out, having their calls, having lunches and stuff. And that's not really the best place. Or you find some corner somewhere, or you fall into a huddle room and you take up a huddle room. And really what you need is a bookable cubicle or a bookable shared space. So shared workspaces moved into the new space. Well, Now we add the same thing that we happened when we all moved home. How do we have a high quality experience in a shared workspace? And so if you take the tools, originally what people were doing is taking the tools we knew from group spaces into shared workspaces. And that's the right way to do it in the sense, because in a shared space, what do we need? In just like at a group workspace, like a conference room, we need to have it manageable and maintained by IT. Meaning, if I walk into that, I need to know it's available and working. I need to have it schedulable and bookable, and I need to have high quality devices in there. Those three concepts needed to come into hot desking. Well, the tools didn't really exist for that. So let's take a classic dock, like our Logi dock. We released a cool docking station called Logi dock a few years ago, and I could put it into a cubicle, and then I could actually put one of our room schedulers, which is a very expensive way to do it. But if I wanted to, I could take a dock and put a room scheduler in there, and I have a booking space to do it. Here's the problem. When I'm not connected to that dock, it's invisible to IT. IT could have no visibility. And let's say it's a high value space, hoteling cube, where your C-level people come in to use, and you don't know that dock doesn't have its firmware update, or maybe the last person used it caused an issue or had the camera unplugged or something like that. So just like in a group space, we need to treat these hoteling spaces to be able to manage and maintain them, and that became a huge deal. And then the ability to book them is also important. And the classic, like our TAP scheduler, that's just for the scheduler, it's $7.99, but that's designed for a group space. So what we did is we took our Logi dock and we took our TAP scheduler, and they had a baby. We call Logi Flex Desk. It's basically a docking station with a scheduler built on, but it also has brains. In other words, when it's sitting there with its screen connected and the webcam connected and the keyboard and mouse connected, ready to be booked, and no one is in there, IT can see and manage all those devices in their room, in that shared workspace. And so that Flex Desk, and hopefully we put a picture up on it while I'm talking, that Flex Desk can now be booked, before I even walk out of my office at home to get in my car to drive in there, I can make sure I have a space booked, ready for me, with a high quality mic, camera, and speaker ready for me to go to do my calls. The only thing I would have to bring in is my laptop, obviously, because I got to do my work. But I don't even need to bring in my power brick, because we power it through the cable connection. And so I can walk in with my laptop. I might want to bring my own headset in, because who wants to share a headset?
Yeah. Yeah.
No one wants that. But I likely,
everybody's
if I'm
got AirPods
on the road,
anymore,
yeah. So I bring that in, and now I can have my office there, and I can have it bookable. And when I'm not using it, it's available for someone else. So it's not this dead space just because I needed a cubicle in the office. And that's the concept that Logi Flex Desk, or Logidock Flex. There's two different names. It's Logidock Flex is the actual name, but I like to call it Flex Desk.
And I found it really interesting when I was hearing you talk earlier about the idea that the costs for using the ecosystem is built into the hardware. There's also the ability with FlexDesk as well to do a QR code scan, where you don't even physically need to have a dock if you have rooms that maybe aren't used as often, or something that you just want to make sure that you're monitoring a space. And from what I'm gathering, it sounds like there's not a lot of cost associated with that with the basic level. And then of course you can kind of go higher and have a little bit more analytics and viewability and tracking who's using and all that. So let's talk a little bit about that so that we can kind of tell the users about that.
So this goes into our service levels, and service levels apply here as well as to rooms. But for this case, our service levels will be, we're always going to give you a basic level of service. So in other words, you get a Flex Desk. You can use what's called Logitech booking. Now you could use Teams panels, which you could buy the licensing for that, or Zoom panels, and so a lot of people will use one of those. But the Logi booking is also available, and it's included in the cost of the device. So you can do basic QR code, you can use it, it can pair up to a calendar, you can do basic use of that. Now, if you want to go advanced in that, you can really step up that. Logitech has added a lot of cool features that you can use for the Logidock Flex that maybe some customers may not want and some others really want, and that's why it's built in a service. And if you buy we have what's called an essentials level of service, which will just include that. And now your Logitech booking software will increase. Now I can add maps to it. I can search. I can actually do things like I can pair my team. Like I can have all my team built into my app that I use to book it, and then I can use my Logitech Tune app, which is something you can download to manage your devices, but it's now got booking built into it. I can pre-book my room when I walk in. I can actually search out where my colleagues might be sitting when I come into the office to make sure I get the most effective out of it. Or like you might want to look for me. If I'm in the office, I have a loud, obnoxious voice, you may not want to sit by me. You can say, well, there's Andrew. I'm going to sit at least two cubicles away, so I don't have to sit him, because I get excited and my voice gets loud as I'm talking. So you can actually do that, and you can actually let people know you're coming into the office. So there's a lot of extra value you can add to the Logitech booking software that that maybe the basic, which is basic QR code, doesn't. But having to be able to pre-book it, book it for like I can with the higher level booking, I can give the ability to maybe the CEO doesn't want to have a room anymore. Maybe, for instance, our CEO doesn't have an office at our headquarters. Her name's Hanukkah. Hanukkah. If you go into the office, she will likely be sitting in one of the cubicles out with everyone else, and she will then book her space like everyone else would. But you can give her maybe priority booking, or you can actually let her book out a cubicle that whenever she's in the office, it's hers and someone else can use it. So there's a lot of cool things you could do with that.
That's very cool. Excellent. So in some of these spaces as well, I guess some of these new products that we have coming out, whether obviously Huddle's been around for a while, the Rally Huddle, but the Meetup 2 I think is new, and some of these spaces for reserving that would actually be a perfect solution for those as well. So let's talk a little bit about those solutions.
Yeah, let's talk about the Rally Bar Huddle, which came out about a year ago, and the Meetup 2, because I think it bodes to talk about them together. So about a year ago, we released a new version of the Rally Bar. Rally Bar's been around for about little more than 3 years now. It's one of the highest selling video conferencing on the market. As you mentioned earlier, more Logitech rooms are sold than any other in any other video conferencing, and that's largely due to the Rally Bar.
Yeah. What's that percentage today? Because I read that percentage before, and I feel like
I'm an engineer and I don't have those off. It is a high number, and I will tell you. The
last time I looked it up, I think it was in the high 30s.
Here, let's do this.
It was pretty
I will get the slide and give it to you, so we can pretend that we're doing it right now. And
Perfect.
This is the amount right here, as you see on the screen. But you'll notice though, it's significant. It's significantly higher than any of our competitors, and that means room adoption with Logitech is more significant than anyone else, and that's largely due to Rally Bar and its predecessors, the Meetup, and we'll talk about why that's important to talk about right now. The Meetup led the way, but about 3 years ago, we came out with the Rally Bar. And the Rally Bar was great because it filled out our whole room solution offering. So the Rally Bar is large, and then we have the Rally Bar Mini, which was designed for small rooms. But when we said small rooms, it worked for all small rooms. Everything to 4 to 6 person rooms up to medium rooms. And the Rally Bar Mini was. Well, the Rally Bar Mini is great, and it really does serve the needs of all those rooms, but it's a little over-featured and a little over-designed for some of those rooms, and so we knew pretty well we needed a product to sit at that 4 to 6, maybe 8 person room, even up to 10 person room, those huddle spaces. And while the Mini did a good job with that, in a lot of huddle spaces you don't use two screens, so we had you're paying for dual screens on the Rally Bar Mini.
The ability to support
in a lot of huddle rooms, you don't need extra microphones. The onboard microphones are more than sufficient to do it. So you don't want to pay for those. And so we went back to the drawing board, and we built a device called the Rally Bar Huddle. The Rally Bar Huddle only has a single screen, so there's only one HDMI port on it. It doesn't have any external microphones. You can't add anything to it. And it basically simplified it for that type of room. Okay. And we knew that for the other rooms, the Rally Bar Mini was already there. So now we're just kind of giving you a lower cost solution. And the other nice thing about the Huddle was it had the ability to run the Android application. So it was a standalone appliance. So it was, it sat at that perfect place for it. Well, so the Rally Bar Huddle, being a standalone appliance, can also connect to a Windows Teams room, and for a lot of times we talked about it that way. But truthfully, a lot of our customers said, if we're going to do a BYOD room, even though the Huddle will do it, and we're going to do or a Windows-based Teams room or a Zoom room with a Windows room system in play, the Rally Bar Huddle, we would really prefer the Meetup, because we really would like something more simplified, because the Rally Bar Huddle can be a standalone application. We don't really need all that internal ability to run Teams and Zoom on it, because I'm going to pair it with a Windows Teams room, or I'm going to do BYOD. And so the Rally Bar Huddle, we started to see in the need that we needed to look at updating the Meetup, and that's why I talk about them in the same vein. And the Meetup, if you remember, is the highest. I might be getting this wrong, so someone might check me on this, but I believe it's the highest selling product in Logitech's history. Yeah. At least in the video conferencing world, it's still beaten every other product out. And think about when the Meetup came out. It's like 7 years ago. 7 years ago is when the Meetup came out. That was in the transition between Skype for Business over into Teams, just before it actually. It was when Zoom was starting to hit big. It was when all these new cloud platforms were coming around, and the classic AV tools were falling, were too big, too much for what we were needing, because all of that classic infrastructure was now being ran in the cloud, and we just needed high quality endpoints in the room. And so Meetup fit that need really well. Looking backwards on the Meetup, though, the Meetup is limited. And what I mean by that is it's a dumb device, and maybe marketing on my side would hate that term, but I think it helps you understand what I mean. In other words, the Meetup didn't have any onboard intelligence at all, and so what we did to give it any intelligence is we would load software on whatever it was connected to give it things like group framing and maybe some acoustic noise cancellation. But that really became limited what we could do with the framing technologies on the Meetup, because it's not on the device. There's no intelligence on the device. We're actually limited to whatever the room system would do, and so we're putting software on the Windows PC to give it that. And so what the Rally Bar Huddle, one of the nice values is it has our full-on CollabOS operating system with all the AI built into the bar. What if we could then give, without the need for the Android-based operating system, the Microsoft Teams Room over Android or the Zoom Room over Android part, but give it all the other features of our CollabOS firmware that we build into our bars, and update that Meetup form factor and bring it up to the modern world. And it's funny, we're talking a 7-year-old device. We're really the modern world that's ancient in our technology. Meetup really is an ancient device in technology terms, and so bringing it up to date. And then there's one other thing we needed to do with the Meetup. In all of our bars and all of our video conferencing products, Logitech has really set the stage for us sustainable products. Building sustainable products, and we could probably do a whole session on that, Brad, so I won't get into it too much. But Logitech is leading the world when it comes to sustainable products, especially in the video conferencing world. And we're really leading out. In fact, we've even published what we've done to give our competitors the ability to do that, because we feel like sustainable products are how we need to move ahead in this world. Well, the Meetup was built before our sustainability initiatives. And so needed to bring the technology up into a modern world, and we needed to build the product in a very sustainable way to match and even beat out what we're doing with the Rally Bars. And so that's what we do. So first of all, we built a new product to add all the features you'd expect to it. So group framing technology, of course, that was there. The Meetup had that. We needed to bring that. But we also added speaker tracking and grid view technology and a lot of other framing. In fact, very much of what your experience is with the site and what I call a grid view when everyone's sitting in front of the camera, like I talked about, we can do that with the Meetup. So even in a room like that. But so the Meetup really, we needed to add all those features. But we also took the time to update our sound algorithm for all of our products, including our Rally Bars. And we have what's called Right Sight 2. It's an updated sound algorithm. And it is a night and day difference in even our original algorithm, which was known for high quality sound.
It works spectacularly well.
We beat that. So we've done our new algorithm is even better than the old one, and the old one was great. So
it's comparable to full custom DSP programming that we would do for for an independent system, but built in. And I love it. I mean, we always tell everybody these solutions are the Apple TV of the conferencing space. Not to toot the horn of Apple, but it's a product that's mass produced that brings the price down to a reasonable price for customers, and fits the mark for almost every single circumstance. So
exactly,
really
and that's
well.
And we needed to do that and update all of that, and that's what the Meetup 2 did. But we're also adding that algorithm to it. But we did some other cool things so everything I just talked about works really well and updates the experience for when you're using a Meetup 2 with a room system. But one of the key reasons people still use Meetups, in fact, probably more so than anything else, is the need to keep BYOD. I think Teams and Zoom 3 or 4 years ago would have told you they looked the other way when it came to BYOD. They really believed. I truly think they believed they were eventually going to get rid of BYOD and no one would be using it anymore because everyone would be moving to a Microsoft Teams room and Zoom room. Now, what they did is they did significantly decrease the number of BYOD, but eventually what happened is BYOD rooms leveled out and are remaining very stagnant, and they're not going away. In fact, it's carved out a definite need for it, depending on the types of room, what it's used for, and the customer and the company that is using it. There are some customers that just don't feel like they can ever dedicate themselves to Teams or Zoom. They're just that's just the nature of what they do as the business, and so they'll never be able to do that. And using interoperability tools like Direct Guest Join or other interoperability tools just isn't in their wheelhouse to be able to do. So they're never going to get rid of BYOD. And even within organizations that have dedicated themselves to Teams or Zoom, there is a type of room and a type of place in their geography that it just makes sense to have a room that you can walk in with a laptop, plug into it, and utilize that room. And that's always going to be there. And so BYOD rooms are not going away. In fact, they've solidified. They may not be growing, but they're not decreasing either. And so we need to do that. Now, the classic tools for BYOD, and this is why Meetup 2 is really standing out here, remember we talked about management? We talked a lot about that on this call today. I couldn't really manage a BYOD device. Just like I talked about Logidock Flex and the Logi Dock. If I'm not connected to that Logi Dock, I can't see it. Well, the same is true with the BYOD Meetup in the Meetup world. If I put a Meetup into a room, and
the software on the computer is what was running it. So
if that laptop is not connected, it's completely invisible to IP. You can't see it. You can't manage it. So the only way to find out that there was something wrong with it is either have someone go in and plug into it, update the firmware, and report back, or the true method was it failed and someone reported a ticket, and now I have to always deal with it after the fact. That is not what you want with a BYOD. You want those BYOD. Yep. So what we did is, because we're now adding CollabOS directly to our Meetup 2, the new Meetup 2, it has an Ethernet port on it. And it has the ability to connect Wi-Fi, which means if no one's physically in the room using it, it's still visible.
Still be managed.
And I can see it. So it's remotely managed and monitoring, and I can remote UI into it. I can do everything that I can do with the Rally Bar, but I can do that within there. The other nice thing we added to the Meetup 2 with BYOD is one key thing that people did with BYOD is because, hey, in a BYOD room, as opposed to a Teams or Zoom room, I don't have anything on the screen when no one's using it. I don't have a calendar. I don't have anything to see who owns this room or what's running on in the room. So what a lot of companies like you did is we'll deploy a BYOD solution, but then we're going to add an extra digital signage processor, and then I figure out the switching back and forth between it. We put that into the Meetup 2. The Meetup 2 has AppSpace, Microsoft Teams, the digital signage for Teams, and Zoom built in, and likely there will be others in the future, but those are the three platforms. So I don't have to go and put in a digital signage processor in there. I can do that right on the Meetup. And then the last thing we did for BYOD is we added USB alt mode technology. It's an updated cable this classic out of the box Meetup 2. Because it could work in BYOD or with a classic Windows, we didn't include the cable. But there's a $200 cable you can buy, and if you buy it, now I can actually deliver both display connectivity and USB connectivity through a single cable. And so that Meetup is really going to manage, it's the center of that BYOD world, and now a single cable operation without the need of deploying drivers on it. I don't need to add display link
similar to the
drivers
Switch?
to it. Similar to the Switch, but better, because in the Switch, I have to deploy a driver on the laptop using it.
Yep.
I don't need that because I'm using the technology within USB 3.0 and above technology. It's called alt mode technology. Okay. That's built into this cable, which means as long as I got a USB-C 3.0 port, I plug into it, I'm going to get USB connectivity and display connectivity through one cable, making that Meetup 2. I mean, it's just heads and tails above the classic Meetup. And I think it's gonna be the next. I think it's gonna be the next biggest product in Logitech's history.
That's great. Well, I have one other item on my list of things to talk about with you, but actually, I'm curious how it fits into the Meetup 2, if it does actually have any relevancy. But a lot of our customers these days are asking for TAA compliancy. And I'm curious how that's going to play into things. Obviously, with BYOD, you're really relying on the computer, but is there anything that's taken into account on the Meetup 2? And then let's talk about the other products and how they're supported on TAA.
So yeah, the Meetup 2 is too new to actually put it into TAA. TAA is a standard, basically where a product is manufactured. And we have some of our products that fall into that, and we have a whole list of them. The Rally Bar and the Rally Bar Mini both. Is that not true? I'm sorry, I'm not an expert on it. The Rally Bar is a TA compliant device, and so with that we have built bundles around it. And with the TAA standard, what we can do is we can bundle products as long as there's a 51% manipulated manufactured, where we significantly manufacture a device within a TAA compliant country. Even products that may fall out of that, as long as they're bundled together, meet that standard. And we've gone to a lot of and I might not be describing it right, so you might want to talk to a sled engineer or anything to get the exact terminology of what I said in the right way. But essentially, we're bundling all these products, and so you can buy the Rally Bar as a standalone TA, but you can also buy a full kit bundled together to meet TAA compliancy, including, from what I understand, if it's not available yet, will be available soon, our Windows-based room system. So
nice.
Through our Asus NUC, you'll be able to get those bundles built in, and they're on our price list now. So if you're familiar with our price list, or actually better just reach out to Brad and his team, they can get you the prices on that, and it's all on our price list now and everything that's on there. But TAA compliancy is a big deal whenever you're talking with anyone with government contracts tied to the government, touching the government, and especially if you are a government entity yourself. But it also, there's other standards out there. Some people, even though it's not a requirement in their industry, some people require it because then they know they have peace of mind of where their products are being purchased. They want to maintain that experience, and they want to make sure these products are being manufactured in the companies that meet the standards of their company. So some companies will even say, hey, no, I really want a TAA compliant. The last thing in that list is products without radio. If you notice, I talked about Meetup 2, and it's great. You have an Ethernet port, and if I don't have an Ethernet port, I have a Wi-Fi. The Rally Bar has a Wi-Fi. The Tap Scheduler has Wi-Fi capability. These are very important in most deployments. But in some situations, especially in high security situations,
government's a big
having a radio is a security risk.
Yeah.
And so we have no radio options for some of our products.
That's
So you'll look at those in the products as well. So we've built those. We have a strong team of SLED reps and SLED engineers that have worked really carefully with our product teams to make sure we have the products mix that is needed in there. Now, what I assume, and I don't know this this is me speaking, I assume that as Meetup 2 becomes desired, we will likely look at doing, and I say look at, whether we will do it or not will probably depend on how and where current versions of Meetup 2 are manufactured, and when it makes sense to move them into the right place. So.
Yeah, we've got a fair amount of experience with government work, but it's always nice as well that when we have a new sales engineer on board who's kind of working through things, Logitech has people on staff that really knows this stuff well and are experts at it, and it's been really helpful as well to be able to reach out to them and get their expertise on that. So it's been really
we have a deep bench when that comes to that. Our team. I like to pretend like I know everything, and I don't. You notice why there's a few points when I was like, and the beauty of it is, if I do know everything, it's because of the team behind me, not because it's actually in my brain. I am smart because of the team behind me is smart, and sometimes that's the best work, because no one can know everything. There's always someone smarter than you on something, and that's the case when we have our SLED team. It's our SLED and Fed team.
So I'm going to hold you to the fire for one more thing. I'm going to revert back to something we talked about earlier, which is the site camera. We started using the site camera with the Rally Plus solution initially. It got pulled because there were some issues. We're excited to see that come back. What's your inside information you can give me about when that hopefully is going to get rectified and re-released?
Let's see if I can do this without getting fired.
Okay.
Just kidding. So let's kind of put it in context. Go back to that. Remember, I talked about the upcoming daisy chaining. That'll likely show up next year. Now, the daisy chaining, when it comes to all that, that's all under the Logitech's control. What I mean by that is because what we need, it's a process. We're building the initial deployment of site camera with its, and then adding smart switching now, and then adding daisy chaining. That's really just a progression of the same technology. We're in control of that. Where connection up with Rally Plus and the site camera changes is because Rally Plus wasn't ever designed to add anything to it. So the Rally Plus is a standalone solution, and the site would be essentially a standalone solution that we would have to rely on whatever they're connected to also manipulate those two things together. Because, for instance, if I take a Rally Plus solution, I need a Windows-based Teams room or maybe our roommate to interact between them. And so because of that, we're going to be partially reliant on us to get that working, and partially reliant on the platform that they're working with to know what to do with those camera streams when we give it to them. And so that's why I say it's kind of a mixed bag. So for instance,
I see.
You can get kind of a good experience through Zoom today because Zoom has the ability to have a Rally Plus as one camera and a Sight as a second camera, and actually utilize both those streams. Now it's not a certified experience. We're not certified to do that with Zoom, and we're not calling that out. But you can get a reasonable experience. But Teams doesn't really do a multi-stream experience yet, and so they don't have that ability to manipulate those two streams at the same time. You can do one or the other, but you really can't do a multi-stream experience yet. And all of these things are in process, and what I don't want to do is step on Teams or Zoom announcements, so I would lead you towards those. But so because of that, because it's partly dependent on us and partly dependent on the platforms, it likely won't come until the platforms know what to do with it. And so that's kind of where we sit with those. And so I'm expecting it to be available next year, but I kind of was expecting it to be available at the end of this year too. So it kind of just keeps moving the goalpost out a little bit. And that's not a knock on the platforms. It's really their roadmaps are their roadmaps, and then we need to work within those. And so that's very important to understand.
Well, and to be fair, it's been really refreshing to know that when a feature is pushed out, it's pushed out because it's thoroughly vetted and tested, and Logitech knows it's going to work well. So the reason that we have not had as many problems is because of that. So I can't complain about it. I just got to understand that it's got to happen in its right timing. So. And
truthfully, when I first came to Logitech, that was a little bit unnerving to me. And I say this with when I first came over, I was like, why does it take so long sometimes to get something? And what I meant by that, like we'd have features that would be released on Teams, and we would be like 6 weeks before we released it in the firmware that could be utilized on one of our products, even though the technical Teams release was out 6 weeks earlier, but we didn't give a firmware that had it on it for at least 6 weeks afterwards. And it was a little frustrating at first. And over time, I realized that's because we care. And we're not going to just let it go out and then have a bad experience. We're going to make sure that we have a good experience with our products. Now, of course, Teams does the same thing to make it. But then the gap between the platform and then the product that it sits on, we want to make sure that our product is going to be as great experience as it can be. And so over time, I had to learn that and sit within the Logitech mindset. And now I'm fully vetted and fully living in that world. But the first year, I was a little sometimes grumbly behind the scenes, and
we learned that lesson
just because of my experience. But
I mean, early on when we were trying to bypass using a strong cable because we thought, we can just put in a Cat 6 dongle and we can handle it ourselves, and then it always failed, and we were back there buying the strong cable and putting it in because it was tested and it worked well. So we learned those lessons.
There's great applications that you can do category extenders with, and we see those all the time. And then there's some places you should never do it, and so you learn that over time. But to that end, Logitech, we try to stay pretty strict when it comes to what we support and what we don't support. In other words, what our tech teams will provide support for, and what things we won't, and that's on purpose, and that's so that we can have a high quality experience in any deployment. So it goes back to my four principles. If we're going to wrap up here as we get down to those, you'll notice that I kept hitting those four principles: high, consistent experience, easy to manage, easy to maintain, and easy to use. High quality audio and high quality video, and they kind of, truthfully, as I said, they're in a priority, but they all work closely together. And Logitech considers them very important. And they all roll together to be a very reliable solution. If you're paying attention to those 4 principles from a product side and from a solution design side, when other designing what product goes into the rooms, so that means on our side and your side, we'll all provide a high quality experience, and that's why Logitech is, when we showed that where we were above everyone else with the number of room deployments, that's why.
Yeah, makes sense. Sounds good. Well, just so we put a little plug out there for us, we've got our experience centers located in Pennsylvania, Exton, Chester Springs, Pennsylvania, so just outside of Exton. Exton's the closest big city to that, somewhat close to Westchester. If anybody's local to that, you'd like to come in and check it out. And additionally, in Southern California, we've got a location that's basically between Los Angeles and Orange County. So if you are within that district and that region, feel free to swing on through and we can schedule an appointment to take you through. We can show all of these Logitech products because we've got all them set up so you can test them, play with them, see how they operate, and really get a good feel for how well they work. So highly recommend it. Andrew, it was a pleasure getting together today. Is there anything else that you wanted to get out there before we close this conversation up?
No, I think we've covered it, but I appreciate coming on, and it's my pleasure to have me on whenever you would like.
Excellent. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for taking the time today, and we'll do this again sometime soon.
You're welcome.